Hey, welcome to Sylvie Answering Interesting Questions, where I come upon questions on the internet that I find interesting and then come and make a video to answer them. This one actually came to me directly. Sometimes I find them on Reddit and I'm like, that's so interesting, I'm going to answer it. This one came to me directly, which was someone who knows that when training with a training partner, you kind of alter knees so that you're not hurting your training partners. For example, when we clinch, we're using like the inside of our thigh to hit people instead of your kneecap so that you're not hurting your training partners. But he was asking me, how do you train straight knees in this way to not hurt your training partners? Because you don't have like a fleshy part that you can use instead of your kneecap when you're throwing like a straight knee. There are a couple of things you can do to work on this. When I answered him directly, I said that you could place the knee, and I said you can wear knee pads. Placing a punch or a strike or a knee, like whatever, when I say placing, this is something that we do with elbows. So when you're using elbows in sparring or clinching or something like that, you actually make you make contact with your elbow on the jaw and then push through rather than bop. Like, so instead of hitting like this, you're placing it and then pushing. You can do this with knees. So you bring it up and you place it on the target that you're hitting your opponent. So you place the knee and then you can kind of like put a little fuck you on the end of it, just a little like this. So you can actually place it so that you're hitting below your kneecap instead of with your kneecap. And this is a little bit like using an alternate part of your body. So you kind of like hit with the flat under part of your knee rather than like pointing it and coming like this. The downside to pushing and placing is that in the same way that we all use like the inside of our leg in clinch sparring when we're training, you'll see this go into the ring. And Kevin and I are always like, man, they're doing like training knees in a fight because you spend way more time training than you do actually fighting. People actually get into the habit of using the like, what are they called? Training wheels, or like keeping the safety on when they're doing things because they hit with this part. That can happen if you're not careful when you use placing and pushing as your way to train with your partners. That doesn't mean don't do it. That just means that you have to train other methods to be able to remember to like really, move all the way through when you're doing things like this. So what does Sylvie do? What does Sylvie do when I totally throw straight knees at my training partners all the time? There are two things that I favor. I do placing and pushing, but the two things that I favor the most are just controlling the power. The speed is still there. You still want to be really fast, but you just don't kind of throw through the target in the same way that you would when you actually want to hurt someone. So when I'm moving around with my husband, Kevin, for example, I like to throw this knee up into his kind of, I don't know, what would you call that? Like a floating rib? Up into the, he would call it a rib. Kevin calls it a rib. I knock people out with this pretty well. It's my left knee, so if I'm facing an orthodox opponent, that's their open side. So basically, it's just gonna be a high knee up into here, and it's about that hard. The way that I just threw it, that's about as hard as it's gonna land on someone. So when I hit Kevin with it, or if I hit a training partner with it, they feel it, but it doesn't hurt. It's one of those things where you're like, I don't want that, I don't like that, but you're not hurting someone, like you're not injuring someone. So it's just kind of getting up on your toe and popping it up in the same way that you could totally pop someone in the stomach with speed, but not with power. You can do that with your knees, just pop about this hard, right? You want to make sure that you keep your guard up, pop, so you're like pivoting off, pop, about that hard. The other thing you can do, and I really like this, and this is when you're doing something that you cannot not be an asshole and actually do in training. You can't like throw a knee into someone's face and not have that be taken the wrong way. When I wrench someone's head down in training and I'm gonna knee them in the face, I'll do a place, like I'll just place my knee on their face. I will never like go through kind of thing. But another thing you can do is just feint the entire operation. Karahat is really, really good at this. When we're sparring and he goes like this, he just like twitches his hip, I know that I just got killed by whatever he would have actually thrown in that situation. So if you are clinching and you want to throw a straight knee, like say you've grabbed and locked your opponent, you've got their head locked and you're wrenching them down, they're bent over like this, you would totally just like bang, you know, straight up into their guts kind of situation. What you can do instead of placing it or instead of like decelerating it or something like this is just twitch it, like just kind of don't go through the full range. So you wrench someone down and you just kind of go like this. It's the same thing as like, oh, could have got you, oh, could have got you. It's really good with elbows, actually. When you're like sparring with someone or you're clinching with someone and you pull, you can just feint the elbow. You just throw it about that far, go like this. That's your upward elbow. In a fight, obviously, you go all the way through. But it's the same thing with knees. You just wrench, wrench, bomb, that would have gone. And then you can pop that one light, and then you can wrench their head down and place that one. Or you can go up on to your target, onto the belly, when you have them here, and push. When you're doing the like placing and pushing, something that's really, really good for knees is you basically pull your opponent over it. So in the same way that like you break a stick, right? So you've got the stick and you like, bah, like break it over your knee. This is what you're doing is you're like bending your opponent over your knee. Your knee basically stays there and you've got their arms and you push your hip forward a little bit, but you pull your opponent over it like this and their body goes, huh. Super exaggerates what your knee looks like to the back row and to the referees. What are they called? Judges who are, sorry, it's the same word in Thai, to the judges who are around the ring watching. So you basically just go here and then pull them over it. And this is really good for training because in a fight, you're accelerating forward and pulling them into it. And it's this like Sean double action. But in training, you're leaving your knee still and pulling them over it. So you're training like half of it and it looks really dynamic. You're not hurting them. You can pull them over it. And then in the fight, you just flex your hip forward also in order to like, bang, like double that situation. So that's my answer to that very, very interesting question of how do you train things that kind of are uncool to train with your training partners without hurting them so that it becomes really cool and really fun. That's how you train elbows and knees that are straight and things like this. You can place them, you can push them, you can semi-feint them, and you can keep the speed but just pull the power way down. So
you talk about elbow placement as if this is like normal, but almost nobody spars with elbows, including Thais.
Yeah.
Like there are gyms where it's forbidden.
Yeah.
So maybe help people understand
so
what you're talking about.
In the same way that I'm talking about like placing and then pushing the knee, I referenced it to the elbow as though this is the reference that people would know. Imagine punching someone in the jaw, right? So if you put your fist flat against someone's jaw and then push, that's basically the like, bah, that's what that hook would be. Whereas in real life, it's bang, like straight through, straight through. You're placing it and then you're pushing it. Chicken Man, he's in the Muay Thai Library, crew guy. He has this amazing, when he's clinching, sparring, even in pad work, he'll throw them at you. When you're kind of like wrapped up, he'll put his elbow on your jaw, on your neck, on your eyebrow, wherever he would be slashing you. He just places the flat part of his elbow and then just pushes through. So it's basically the like make contact and then push through like this. So that's pushing the strike with elbows and with knees. You can do that with both of them.
So are you recommending that people spar with elbows?
I think you should. If you can control it, I think it's awesome to spar with elbows, and they'll definitely, you'll have a much more rich understanding of the timing and context of elbows if you spar with them. Plus it gets you and your training partners more used to elbows coming at you. It's the same thing as like if you never catch kicks and then your kick gets caught, you have this like, oh fuck response as your first thing. Having elbows come at you, you kind of like desensitize yourself. As long as you can control it, which you can start out really slow, or you can start out with this pushing, and then you can just kind of like, as you get more comfortable with it, speed it up and things like this. I think sparring with elbows and straight knees and things like this is